Hello and welcome to Lists and Other Things That No One Asked For with Jesse Barbin, your weekly mini podcast with essays and lists about music, TV, books, and in general, the painful process of growing up. Thank you for tuning in. I grew up in the same city that my dad grew up in, so from time to time I would run into people he knew, and frequently they would have something to say about him, like, "You're Bill's kid? Oh man, Bill is an animal. Man, what a cool guy your dad is. Man, we got into some stuff when we were your age." And me, living with him full time, I would just think, really? That's weird because he won't even let me watch The Simpsons, and he won't leave me alone about my grades. So this super cool guy you're talking about, I've never met him. Through chance and proximity, one of my good friend's dads knew my dad. And he was a bit younger than my dad, but he said, Bill was always a good person. I really looked up to Bill. That part I could believe. My dad is mad responsible, always there for his family, working hard, never called in sick. I still can't picture him as this chill, freewheeling dude, though. Part of it is, I don't think he tells a lot of childhood stories, and I think he might have had a bad childhood, or at least he had a stressful childhood. He probably has some trauma is what I'm saying, and what makes me think this is that people who have trauma either absolutely refuse to talk about it or talk about it constantly, and I think my dad falls into the don't talk about it category. Any stories he does tell start in his late teens and go forward from there. I never questioned this growing up because parents are barely even people to you when you're young, so of course he didn't have any childhood stories. He didn't exist until I came into the world and needed him. He doesn't tell a lot of stories of his teen years either, honestly, but when he does, it's a man constantly editing. It's like watching a letter being redacted with thick black marker in real time. We were all out at, it's not important where we were. And then so-and-so, you don't need to know who was there. For one, he told these stories reluctantly. And for two, I know for a fact that he did not care one iota if we thought he was cool. A nice thing is, I grew up near my uncles and aunts, and they were always happy to fill in the gaps with just the wildest things you ever heard. Each story was set somewhere in Albuquerque, and my uncles would always give the cross streets. Every story had to have cross streets. It was out on Lomas and Eubank. The city wasn't as built up back then, it was pretty open in those days, etc. My dad and his brothers were huge car guys and motorcycle guys, so each story also had a lot of talk about engines and other car parts. The gist of engine talk was usually, a Chevy 350 is pretty great, a Chevy 454 is powerful but it's too big, and while we are not a Ford family, a Ford 302 was actually really fast and we feel kind of guilty for thinking this. The stories blur together, but here are some of the common themes with some of the snippets that I remember. Breaking the law. Your dad would get off work at 11 and then he would just drive with the pedal to the floor all the way home going like 90 and the cops couldn't catch him because he was so fast. Number 2, great bodily harm. That was the night that so-and-so dislocated his hip, and then later your uncle crashed into the wall at a racetrack and we thought he was done for, but he was wearing that racing harness and he climbed out and he was fine. We weren't sure if he could ever have kids, but he was fine. Number 3, damage to property. Well, that fire started small, but we were able to stomp it out. Thank goodness. If not, a bunch of acres would have gone up. Or, it was old gas, so we didn't think it would be that flammable. Number 4, exasperating parents. Yeah, Mom was pretty annoyed about it. Yeah, I think she's still mad about it. Yeah, let's talk quieter. I don't want her to hear it still bothers her. Number 5, skipping school. People didn't even know who your dad was at our school. He never went to class. An overall theme would be, do as I say, not as I do. Or do as I say, not as I did. My dad, the responsible Bill of the present day, would inevitably chime in during these sibling retellings and say things were being exaggerated quite a bit and that I had better not skip school, light anything on fire, or run from the cops. There's old boring dad reasserting himself. I'm just embarrassed that I never have any cool stories to tell my kids. My dad had adventures, man. I just have long lists of shows I've been to, and where my uncle's stories had to have cross streets, mine always have to have a venue and who else was playing. For example, I saw Fall Out Boy at the launch pad with Bayside and the Academy Is in the summer of 2004, right before Take This to Your Grave blew up. It doesn't sound like it, but this is actually a cool story because Fall Out Boy is very big now, and the Launchpad is a really small venue relative to the success that Fall Out Boy would go on to achieve. I was about 10 feet from Patrick Stump the whole show. He's very short. It's a cool story, I promise. It's very cool. Thank you for listening to Lists and Other Things That No One Asked For. I post a new episode every Monday. If you prefer reading, this is also available as a Substack. You can find me on social media at Jesse Barbin. See you next week. Whoa, my goodness, this is a hard sentence.